Hi guys, Bob here, and this is my Learn Rebelle8 video. So let's get started right away. Up in the corner, you've got your 8 kind of media brushes, along with your favourites and recents. So you can click recents and get all the recent brushes that you have used. Then we've got the tools here. I'll go into them a wee bit later on. But this is the first painting. I've been messing around with it and adding in some textures. So let's make a new layer first. You can make a new layer here, you can group layers, you can put a new filter layer, and you can delete a layer. So I could delete that layer. I can make a new layer, and if you double click on it, you can rename it. So you can see that they've added in these new bristle brushes, where there's a lot more impasto depth, and there's these new soft shadows, and if you go across colours you can scrape away some of the impasto. Now what you'll notice is that it's very shiny, and you can alter that by coming down here to the visual settings, and if you go to the impasto depth we can turn that down. You can turn down the gloss so it's not as glossy, and you want to keep the soft shadows on because that's the new technology. And you can change these environments here as well, and if I zoom back out you see how lovely those look. We come into the brush settings, so under bristle brushes, under paint, we can do colour, noise. We can enable that, and we can increase the noise per bristle. So there's a different colour, as you can see, per bristle or per stroke. If I turn that up higher, like all the way up, you'll end up with a rainbow idea happening. And what you can do is you can take that all the way back down and you can put in colour of noise per stroke. So what can happen here is you can have a green and it would change slightly, change fully. And you can see I've put that right up to the top, so hue, saturation and lightness or value. If you've got the hue all the way up in saturation, it's going to give really bright and different colours. And if you put the lightness all the way up, it can be white or black or like a dark shade of a colour. If you ever want to reset a brush, you can just click this button and this will take you back to what was the original intent of that brush, the default brush. This also exists up here. So once you make a change, that immediately becomes available, and I can hit reset and it goes back to its former size, colour, shape. Let's have a look down here in the corner and work our way through some of the layers. So we can add new layers, and this can be very helpful, especially with regards to the type of layer, and there's different kind of blending layers. Now I understand the pigment here doesn't work if you are using a different type of layer, and it will become disabled. And I'll get to the pigment in a minute or two. But if I go in and change this to a hard light layer, and you're changing parts of the lightness of the area that you work on with this blending layer, you can add more of the kind of blush and darken it down and add highlights to things. Say we added a highlight to the nose, to the eyes, make them a bit more sparkly. We can add a highlight to the lips, which you can see how that's made some changes. It depends what you're looking for. Me personally, I was trying to get a kind of darker look to this picture, a kind of more moody appearance. So that's the layers that you can choose, and there's all different ones. I will put a graphic on the screen going through what they do. So the next button I want to show you is down in the bottom right, and it is the paint selection, which turns everything red, as you can see. Now we can paint a selection, and you need to be careful of what brush you pick, or otherwise you'll end up with outlines. I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's say we choose a soft airbrush and we try to do a selection here. So you need to choose white to choose a selection and black to deselect. So it looks like I've selected the eye, and instead of that I'm going to choose a solid flat brush. So rather than a kind of a soft edged brush, I'm going to choose a solid flat brush. So now we click off the paint selection button. As you can see, we have our selection, but this is where you need to be a wee bit careful and understand what it is that you've painted. Because what will happen, go for the green here, is that you will notice that my paint is applying to outside of the selection. And this is due to the brush that we chose. It had a soft edge and it goes over into outside lines. We've got some of my drawings. So this is an original version of that previous drawing. We've got a Spider-Man drawing. And you can find all these drawings on my videos on my channel. So please remember to like, subscribe, hit the wee bell notification if you want to get notified of future videos. Let's have a look at the canvas button, which is down here. And when we click it, this dialog box opens up. And we can choose different textures like this one, for example. You can change the texture scale down here, make it bigger or smaller. One thing I've not noticed in previous versions, and I've only found it recently, is down here in the visual settings. You can come down here and you can change the texture appearance on the screen. For example, paint texture, as you can see, it makes it more subtle the lower it is, and gives it a nicer look. So if you're using the paint texture, it will only affect the painted parts of the image, and if you're using the paper texture, it's the parts of the image that are not painted. You can obviously choose different canvases and just see what you like. As I zoom in, you can see the nanopixel technology with all those little fibres. Another button is the deckled edges, which when you click it, what happens is you get these furry bits at the side so that it doesn't just look like a square bit of paper. If I turn that off again, you can see it goes back to being a square bit of paper. It kind of makes it more appealing to the eye. So the canvas matters quite a bit, as you can see. And if you choose a pastel dry, you can see that it's hitting those edges, and if I lean heavy, it picks up more of those ridges and those edges, and if I apply more, it grabs onto those ridges, giving us that much more traditional look. If I change my canvas to something totally different, go with this, and we get a different pattern from the one I had before. But it's worth noting, it's worth playing about with canvases so that you get the natural look that you're looking for. This is something that makes Rebelle great. You're not just a plain surface like you have in Sketchbook Pro. There's actual bumps in the surface that you interact with as you paint, and all the simulation interacts with it like a real canvas in front of you. It is really lovely. You can smudge together and push, and it's just lovely. So talking about smudging, if we turn on the pigment, it's a Pro version thing, so be aware of Pro version and Standard version. Let's say we do red. Let's go for a really red. If I go for the blender tool over here and start blending them together, you can see that lovely orange coming through. Okay, so that's pigments and using colour pigments. It gives you the greens, the blues, the reds, and they all mix properly. So above the layer panel, let's have a quick look at some of the stuff because it's important. Let's say we want not to change a layer. We want to lock it, and we can do it with this little icon here. You can just click the lock to get rid of it. Then you can draw again on that layer. The next one is lock transparency, which can give you some really cool effects, and it's not something I've used very much, but I'm going to be using it in the future. Lock transparency is here. What this means is that anything that we paint on that layer can be coloured. So it's kind of like a selection method. Anything that's got paint, once you press a button, anything that's got paint, say you've got a symbol here and you want to remove the background, we can come up here and start using the selection tool, which is here, and we've obviously got our magic wand and our various selection tools, add selection, remove selection, and it gives you this little keyboard shortcut next to it. Control D, for example, is to deselect all. So we're going to try the wand, which I'm hoping is improved, and it is. So let's say I've missed a bit, you can hold down the shift key and hit the button to add that to your selection. So let's delete the background, and we're left with our Never Ending Story logo. If we then add lock transparency, we take away the selection. So you can see that lock transparency is really useful for doing logos and the likes. The next one's masking fluid. So if we use a layer, but let's say I don't want to change anything to do with the face, I can add this to a masking layer. Let's draw it black. We can make it slightly transparent so that we can see what we're masking. Maybe a different colour would be better. Blue, yeah. What we're doing here is masking parts of the drawing. So if I go into my masking, add my masking layer, and I mask opaque, and I go to the layer below, we cannot draw inside that masked part. It masks off those areas. And the same thing applies with hard edges or soft edges, because if we'd used a soft edge to make the mask, some of it will overflow beyond perhaps where we intended it to. If I change this to mask transparent, then I can only draw inside the lines that I've got masked, and everything else outside is left alone. Let's zoom back in. You can see that we have this little diamond button. So let's add a new layer, click the little diamond button and zoom back out. You can see the little diamond icon in the corner, and if I go to a blue colour, for example, I am then adding metallic paint onto the drawing. You can see the pull in the paint, you can see the paint moving, it really is lovely. Adding in different colours, so let's put in a complementary colour here. It is amazing how you can grab the top edges of this paint and pull it around. I'm really loving it. I'm really loving this new feel to Rebelle. If we go back to our never-ending story and we turn on that transparent lock, we could then also make a metallic layer, and we can start turning this symbol into a cool metallic logo. So you can see using the layers, using the layer masking can really make a big difference to our drawings. We'll talk about this little symbol here a bit later on. That's to do with watercolor, as is this button here. So please remember to like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Let's have a quick look at our colour panel, and normally we've got our colour wheel here, and we've got these symbols at the top which allow us to bring in sliders, recent colours that you've used, and that'll be this part here. So when you use a colour, it adds into the bottom here, as you can see, and then you can turn them all off. But let's bring back our wheel and our other colours down the bottom here. And these are the colour libraries. So you can click that library button, and then you can bring in different colours, pastels, body colours, which is a really good one. So we've got these little buttons. You can add in a colour set, you can import a set. Let's say you've got a drawing that you like with particular colours on it. And once you've clicked it, it'll add it into the top here, and we can rename it. Just double click. Name it whatever you want. You may want to bring up the mixing palette, which you can do through the window mixing palette, and then find where it's loaded on your screen. And there we go. You can see the mixing palette here. And so let's say we're mixing this red and this complementary colour here, mix them together in all kinds of different shades, and add a bit of white so you can see the different shades through to the blues, and you'll be able to save that mixing palette into your library. You can find the mixing palette library here. If you go up here, you can undo, redo, clear the palette. So once you've got a mixing palette here, you can say set empty mixing palette or add current mixing palette, as you can see on the screen. You can rename them again if you want. If you've got one for faces, one for cold drawings, one for warm drawings, one for autumn. So that's a mixing palette. The new tool which I mentioned in my previous video is this colour harmony. You can click complementary, triadic, analogous, complementary and tetradic. And when you choose a colour, what happens is you get them along the bottom here. Yeah, so just be careful, you might have to extend your docking panel, helping you to access them a bit easier and not trying to struggle underneath the colour wheel. Like I said, you can see your histories, your colour histories. You can change to a square colour wheel. You can change all these things, sliders, whether you want HSL, HSV, recent colours, icon size and clear. So if you wanted to clear your recent colours, you can clear it. Colour set, create colour set from, and again, we've already looked at some of this. There's a text file version there that you can use. So that's a colour wheel. And I want to point out this icon here, which is mix colour. I can hold down the X key and I can mix with the next colour I choose. So if I'm on a blue, I hold down the X key, click on the white, and it slowly changes the colour towards the lighter colour. So you're mixing as you go. So it's a really handy tool to use. Up in the top left we have the navigator. It's like a separate thumbnail. If you've ever drawn something and you zoom right out, it sometimes can look wrong, and it probably is wrong. You're going to have to change something in your drawing. This navigator lets you zoom to fit the screen, for example, so your drawing will fit the screen as I've just clicked there. You can flip the drawings, which is a good idea, especially when you're drawing, to make sure your drawing looks correct, your face looks correct the other way around. Worth keeping that in mind. You can reset the rotation if you've rotated the canvas. Up above the navigator, we can click here and we will find the tilt. This is for the watercolor section, which is later in this video. Now that we've dealt with the right hand side panels, we're going to start on the left panels over here. Our main panels, you've got the oils, and then you can choose a brush down here, and the dialogue at the bottom was added in by me for time-lapse recording. But let's take a look at oil. Let's forget about these. These are additional tools. These don't quite relate to the tools above, and we'll talk about them a bit later. So when we choose one of these, the actual properties of the particular tool at the top are down here. And choose the kind of things that we've talked about in the past, which is like dirty brush, multicolored brush. If you click multicolored brush, you end up with two colours on the brush. If you click dirty brush, it picks up some of the previous colours that are already on the canvas, as shown on the screen. Eventually, with the dirty brush, it will go away, leaving you with the main colour. A bit of playing around is required to get these to work the way that you want them to. So give it a go and see how you go on. We've got different parts to our brushes here. You've got your paint, paint and mix, paint and blend, blend and erase. And then you've got loading and oiliness. Loading, obviously how much paint is on the brush, how much opaqueness is going to be on the brush, which really matters when it comes to your bristle brush. As you can see in the graphic, there's different settings for oiliness and loading, and that will give you a bit of an idea as to what happens. So the difference between the bristle brushes and these brushes here, bristle brushes, you can add multiple colours to them through the brush creator menu, as I've shown you in my previous video. So you can reset your brushes like I've just done with that brush there. I can now go back to the original brush that was there, and if you do make a new brush, make sure you go in here and click to save the volume, size, opacity, water, etc. as a brush preset. And so if you recreate a new brush, which we can do down here, I'll show you that just now. So you can go down here, click this button. So let's do a per stroke brush. And I want to do that each time and get a different colour. What will happen is this reset button will show up here. But if you want to keep it, you have to save the changes as default. You can click this button here. Now we can see those two brushes are different brushes with different settings. And now ours doesn't have this reset button change available to us because it's defaulted. So you could have went in there, did the same thing, but you can do it direct from the brush creator window. This brush will change colour every time we draw. So this is line smoothing. So we can take a tail and we drag. This gives us nice smooth lines. You can see that as it crosses, it drags the oil. It's a lovely, nice look. And it's really just great to play with and experiment with. We also have these oils which do not have any depth to them. So these are the synthetic oils. There's no impasto depth to them. Quite good for if you've got impasto on the screen and you don't want to affect it. You can use these ones. We've got watercolors, which is a subject all on its own. We've got pens, which is good for lining. But be aware, we do have water associated with them. So if the water's on the page, they will run and give you the watercolor effect. So that's the fountain pens. Same idea here with the different tools that you can choose. Pencils are really good, especially for doing some powdery kind of looks that can be good for a skin texture and giving a bit more dynamics to your drawings. Pastels are really lovely. I've showed you them earlier. When you push them together, they smudge together like actual pastel. It is really lovely. We've got your markers, which do have special features to them. And these are similar to the blending layers, but rather than a full layer, you can create dodge, the hue, luminosity, colour. And we've got sprays and we've got our favourites. So you can add a favourite in. If you're in any tool and you find a brush you like, you can go here, copy brush preset to favourites. And if I look in favourites, it's now there. So let's get through these tools one at a time. So blend, it's pretty straightforward. You get a blend and the blending types are down here. You can see you can blend parts of your image. I tend to use tools direct on the tool pad. When you're in oils, I tend to use this blend here as opposed to the blend above. Let's start with the smudge tool and smudge here. And as you can see, I've got a bit of slowdown. Don't know why it's slow. I do have a fast PC, so it could be just the size of the brush I'm trying to use, and it is too big. You can see it works a lot faster on a smaller brush. Smudges, again, I don't really use smudge too much, but I do use liquify quite a bit. So if I go with a soft liquify, say I want to take this cheek in a bit and change the shape of the face, you can see it's quite dramatic. Use this tool to your advantage. It can be pretty good for getting some texture in. So you can see if you hold down shift, you get the ruler, and we get this kind of effect. So while we're talking about rulers, I want to go up to window, click rulers, and you'll get the new ruler dialog box, which is here. Click it, giving us access to this, which is our ruler, and we can set up parallel lines, which is pretty handy. So for example, what I was doing there, I was want to give this kind of a matrix look to it, pulling the face into the matrix. You can also enlarge, so if you want the eye to be larger, for example. So say you want the ear to be smaller, you can move on to the next icon and we can make the ear slightly smaller. It can be a bit tricky, and if you do get stuck, you can reverse using this button here, or you can just use the undo button. Shift to the left, which gives a really cool effect. Like you can see, there's almost like a wave coming through here, and if I pull that down, you're looking at a kind of audio wave look. Really, really lovely. This bit at the edge is annoying, so let's try and use the fill tool, which we're going to get to in a minute. So colour fill. But we can twist the face if we want, and it gives us weird twisted face. It goes all a bit odd. The clone tool is if you hold down the Alt key somewhere, and then when you take it away and start painting, it will paint a clone of the area that you've selected. Then we've got the eraser tool, which is to erase things back to the original canvas, and because I've turned my canvas at the back black, you can see it's coming through as I erase the paint on top of the black canvas. So we've got the fill tool, which gives us gradients and patterns. So if you want a gradient, you can see that it can give you some cool effects. And there's different gradients here. You can add in your own gradients, you can add patterns. Let's give this a go and play around with the tolerances. Again, I've got a cool effect. So that's the fill tool. Then we've got the dropper tool, that's just to choose a colour. So you can sample all the layers of the canvas or just the layer you're on. We've got the undo and redo tools, which are self-explanatory. We then have the water tool, which is for watercolours, and we're going to miss them just now. We're going to go to selections, which we've talked about. So the selection tool, you're going to have to play around with. Do remember this contiguous button if you want to just select a particular area of the face rather than selecting across all of the face. Then you've got your different types of selections and different shapes. We've got our transform tool, which is pretty useful. If we were to take a selection and increase the size, it would blur. Fractal, which you can see here, is a method which when you blow it up actually tries to increase the resolution of what is drawn. So let's see if it works. As you can see, it's quite bitmappy, quite pixelated. So let's hit enter and see if it fixes it, which as you can see it tries to do its best to fill in the information that wasn't there before. So we then also have the warp tool, which is here, and we can increase the splits, the number of splits. You can actually add in other splits. So if you wanted to add one here, you can do that. Then that allows you to try and manipulate the drawing by warping it around. Say you want the nose to be wider, so on and so forth. You want a bigger eye, you want a bit of a twist. And then when we're happy, we hit enter. The drawing has changed slightly. So that's the warp tool. You've got the move tool, the deform tool. We've then got the perspective tool, maybe if you're trying to show something lying on a shelf or on a wall. Then I've got this canvas size, which is literally just if I increase the canvas size, I hit enter, it will increase the canvas size. And because of my background canvas being black, it looks like we've got a black border. Let's have a look at reference images. This is where you can add an image you want to use as a reference and measure off of. You can then bring it up on the screen, the dialog box, and increase the size. You bring up the dialog box and you can change the size of the image on the screen. You can then start adding reference image guides to get the size of the eyes, the nose, Now these reference image guides are red, and you can change that by going into the edit menu to preferences. Edit preferences, and you've got to be careful here, you've got to go to colour to get this to work. So reference image line, colour width. If I increase the width, click OK, you'll see that they're now a lot bigger. And if I go back to the preferences, I can change it to yellow and make it slightly smaller. Now they're yellow, thinner, but you can see them. To delete, you can hover over and hit the delete button. You can obviously flip your reference if you want. You can turn off the colour so that you can see the values. You can click this button if you've zoomed in and it'll fit it back into the dialog box. You can rotate to the right, don't know why you'd want to do that, and you can reset the transformation. We can turn off the image and we can turn it back on, and as you can see it's massive. We'll need to decrease the size of it to get it onto our canvas. So we position it, click it where we want it to be, and leave it there. Maybe if you want to trace, which can help you learn a lot about anatomy and different things, use this as a tool. I do like using the reference guides because it gives me measurements how to make somebody's face look correct. You can change the opacity. Just be careful you don't move your reference later on, because then it will not be in the correct spot where you started using it from. You can upload images to the reference library if you've got previous references that you've used. Let's look at the rulers. So like I said, you've got this one which is parallel lines. You can turn that off and then you can only draw along that singular line where the ruler is. It will only draw straight on that line. Here you've also got circles, so if you want to draw a circle or an ellipse. If you find your tool messed up, come up here and you can reset using the X button. And then obviously this is for drawing circles. You can turn on parallel lines and then it'll do circles from the centre point. Freehand is a bit of a weird one. I've never quite understood why you would use it, but it kind of gives you the general shape of a circle but allowing you some freedom of movement. Then you can lock so that the points cannot move. The perspective tool is here. You can do 1 point, 2 point and 3 point perspectives. Now if you can't see the blue dots, you will need to zoom out and you'll find your blue dots somewhere. These are the points in distance where the perspective will disappear to. That's the perspective tool, and you can do the freehand thing again. And then there's the mirror tool, which is new. And what I found with the mirror tool is that it's two independent brushes. It's mirroring, but it's not mirroring exactly. So let me give you an example. Let's say you've got some paint here. Say we change the brush, and if we sweep across that area, you can see it actually affects the paint on that area. And you're able to influence different things on the different sides of the mirrored brush. If I was trying to mix it, let's give a wee shot of mixing. Nothing on one side, and you can see I'm mixing the paint more on the other side. So something to be aware of, if you're looking for a pure mirror tool, you might want a new layer above all other layers. Tablet mode is good, so if you hit the tab button, you get rid of all the toolbars and you're free to draw. And then you can hit the tab again and all your dialog boxes, all your toolboxes will come back. So let's start talking about watercolor. And watercolors are up here in the corner. Let's zoom in. This is a watercolor brush. We've then got our wet, dry and blow water around. And then we've got our typical toolboxes down here. And just to point out this button here, which is transparent, semi-transparent and opaque. Transparent sets colours to the most translucent, allowing previously painted areas to show clearly through subsequent layers. Apparently great for glazing techniques. On transparent mode, a blue line down here and then a red one over the top. You can see the layer below coming through quite easily, and it turns it purple. And if we keep going, it'll turn it kind of black. Semi-transparent is kind of going somewhere between that and opaque, and if we can keep layering on until it totally overcomes the colour below. And then opaque, it should be again layering on top and you lose the layer below. Let's start by wetting the paper. So if we zoom down in here, you've got view the water on the paper, which there's none at the moment. You can then hit the wet the layer and you'll see it turns blue. And then turn that off and you can no longer see the water on the paper. So let's say I draw a red line up here and I watch as the watercolour takes effect. And I can pause it, I can play it, I can pause it, and then I can fast dry using this button here. So when you fast dry, you've dried the colour into the page. So if I was to view the water layer, You can see there's no excess water on the page. If I want that colour to run again, I could add more water, as you can see here. So you can go back over the bits that's painted after you've fast dried them, and it can pick up the colour. And that brings me to the visual settings. So if you go down to the visual settings in the corner here, click this button, you can see the watercolour behaviours and these sliders. In this drop down we have some presets, like say hot pressed paper, and we can give it a try. Let's see what we get. And these settings will do different things. Now what I would say is if you are doing clouds, you probably want the absorbency to be up quite high, and we'll leave the setting somewhere there. If you leave the absorbency all the way down and you draw different colours, you do tend to get a strange effect happening, more of a layering effect. And what you tend to find is you end up with these kinds of lines of colour as opposed to soft blended edges. Then we'll do the same with high absorbency. As you let the watercolour go, the hard edges disappear, it becomes a lot more soft edged. It gives you that soft flow between colours, which then kind of gives you a nice cloud look. That's the visual settings and the watercolour. Let's look at adding some water to the page. Obviously if I just had water here, like in real life, a big blob of water on the page, then I was to take a highly loaded brush, say with red, and let's just bring this on to see it. So let's just paint here and see what happens. Add a bit into the middle of the water and let it go. There's no tilt on this at the moment, and the water flows through the puddle of water. If I was to put tilt on it, which is up here in the corner, the tilt, so it depends which way you tilt it. If I tilt the paper down, what will happen is the water will flow down. If you bring up the water layer, you see it running towards the edge of the puddle that we've got. And here we've got a drip appearing, which you can see, and that's because in here we've got create drips, and you can change the size and the length of them. You can also add granulation, which is like leaving hardened paint flecks on the screen. You can see some of the granulation effects starting to take place here when the paint dries, and you end up with these saturated points. You can see it here as well. So that's watercolour, and what I'll do now is we'll paint the quick picture, which I said I was going to do. I'll speed up so you don't have to listen to my boring voice for much longer, and I'll do a separate video on watercolours at a later time. So let's delete this, let's zoom out, and let's do ourselves a simple watercolour. So let's wet the layer, and I'm going to use this brush, which seems to be quite good for giving good cloud effects and sunset effects. So I'm filling in the sky here, quite a crazy looking sky. If you do want to get rid of some of these hardened edges, you can go up and use your blender brush. You could blend some of these, giving softer edges, softer transitions between, and you can just blend away as you see fit. So here we go, we've got our weird looking sky. And I'm going to fast dry it there. That's it dried in place, but we still have water in the canvas, and if you don't want that, you can go down and dry the layer. Go back to my brushes and back up to the top, because I do like these new brushes, which are the bristle brushes. And I'm going to come down here and add some gold ochre to add what is meant to be a hill in the background. Let's try this bristle brush, and I'm going to go for something really dark as it comes towards the front of the page. So we're going to have a landscape here and fill it in. So adding in wee bits of patterns and different bumps and different things to give it a bit of feature to the painting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some dry painting and turn the water all the way down so that it doesn't run. So we're going to add in a tree and some other items. And there you go, a simple but effective way of using watercolour. Let's talk about stencils. Let's say I've got this drawing and I want to add some kind of image, like make it a bit more different. I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to go to Window, and then I'm going to go to Assets. This will bring up our dialog for stencils, structures and paths, as you can see here. I've created a couple of stencils, and if you do like, subscribe and all that, there's likely to be a video at some point in the future with some of these downloadable stencils and vectors that I've created for paths. Let me find something I've done recently. Let's start with stencils, and as you can see, I've made this flower stencil, and let's make it bigger. And what you can do with your stencils is once you've got them, you can invert them, and now I can hopefully draw a bit better through the stencil. You can obviously move, rotate, spin the stencil around. So let's say I want flowers all over my sky, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a special metallic layer, and we're going to try some stuff and see what happens. I'm going to go back to oils, bring up the bristle brush, and we're going to make this umber colour. Now I'm just going to gently drag across the stencil. If you click on the stencil, we can now get rid of it, and as you can see, it's added a really cool effect to our drawing. Structures is similar to stencils, but they're less rigid. Structures are used to get texture into your drawing. Let's have a look at that and see what I can do with it. Let's say I've got this here, and it could be some tree branches or something different. And finally, we've got paths. Paths is a vector file, SVG file. So we can add these in, say for example this triangle, and it only allows you to draw on the line, as you can see. So that's stencils, structures, paths, watercolours. One thing I've missed down in the corner here is the filtered layers, or the filter layers, and you can add in, say, a colour balance layer. What you've then got is a filter on your layer, and you can make all different things happen. As you can see mid-tones, shadows, make the shadows really dark, and it has quite a dramatic effect and can be very useful, especially if you're nearing the end of your drawing and perhaps you want to add a warm glow to it or a cold colour to it. You can turn these on and off, and like I said, it's a really handy tool. And again, one last thing I forgot was the trace layer, which is quite a cool tool. Okay, so let's say you've got a drawing or an image like this. This is my little dog Lily, and it's a bit of a fuzzy photo, as you can see. But let's make a tracing layer. We add a layer above the tracing layer, and what we can do is grab a big brush, and when we start going over the image, you can see we end up picking up the colour from the tracing layer. Let's try making this eye bigger, for example, or a little nose here. And very quickly, because you don't have to go and choose loads of colours, you can start making a new image from this using the colours from the image below. I'll keep going at this, I'll speed it up and let you see the final result. You could just use this to trace, and like I said, it's really good for adding colours. So that's me done with the little dog painting, and it was made in about 10 minutes. It could be really useful for, let's say, you're trying to get some colours into your image, but you don't want to draw the image, you don't want to trace, you want just the colours. So let's say you want some autumn colours with an autumn picture behind to get all those lovely oranges and browns, as you can see on the screen. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's taken me about 40 or 50 hours to make it. Hopefully it's been of use to you. Please like, subscribe, as I said, if you could. That helps my channel massively and gets it out to YouTube that wee bit more. Thanks for watching, and Wee Bob is out.